$49,300. That's what my parents decided I owed them for the crime of being born. Not as a loan, not as a joke, but as an actual itemized invoice, complete with line items for food, housing, and clothes. They even added a category called emotional support and then wrote waived next to it, like they were doing me a favor by not charging me for their love. And when I refused to pay, they didn't back down. They escalated. They manipulated. They weaponized my entire family against me. They even contacted my employer. But here's what they didn't expect. I wasn't going to break. I was going to fight back. And what I discovered about them in the process would change everything. I used to think money arguments only happened in broken families, the kind you see on late-night talk shows or those dramatic documentaries where someone betrays someone for an inheritance that wasn't even promised to them. I never imagined my parents, the same people who taught me to count coins in a glass jar when I was 7, would one day hand me an itemized bill worth $49,300. Not as a joke, not as a warning, but as a debt they believed I owed them simply for existing. It started on a Thursday, which somehow makes everything worse. Thursdays are supposed to be invisible days, too close to the weekend to be stressful, but too far from Monday to be meaningful. I had just finished a long shift, the kind where your legs hurt before you even start walking, and I was unlocking my apartment door when I saw the envelope sitting on the floor. My name was written on it in my mom's handwriting, the same neat cursive she used on birthday cards and grocery lists. For a second, I smiled. I thought maybe they were surprising me with something, an early birthday note, a family invitation, something normal. But when I opened it, the first thing I saw wasn't a message. It was a number so big it made my brain glitch like an old computer freezing. $49,300. Below it, total reimbursement for upbringing, expenses, and parental investment. I remember blinking twice, like maybe the ink would rearrange itself into something more rational. But no, it stayed there, bold and smug like a punch to the chest I hadn't braced for. I sat on the floor right next to the door and kept reading. There was an actual breakdown, line by line, labeled like a hospital bill or some overpriced hotel invoice. Food, $14,000. Housing, $18,000. School transportation, $2,700. Clothes, $3,800. Emotional support, priceless, but waived. They actually wrote that. Waived. My own mother and father put a 0 on emotional support like it was a coupon they decided not to redeem. I didn't call them. I didn't even move for what felt like half an hour. I just stared at the paper, unsure if I should laugh or cry or scream. I think part of me was waiting for a hidden camera team to jump out from behind my couch, shouting that it was all staged. But my life isn't a prank show. My parents weren't the kind of people who did jokes like that. If anything, they were the kind of people who'd call the police on someone for dinging their car door in a parking lot. After a while, my phone buzzed again. A group message appeared. My dad had created a family chat, added my aunt, my uncle, and even my older cousin. The message read short, "We've asked her to repay the expenses for her upbringing. It's only fair and responsible." Then another message followed straight after. "We hope the family supports this decision." Support? They wanted witnesses. They wanted backup. They wanted pressure. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Before I could even process it, messages began popping up. My aunt, "It's not unreasonable. Kids these days don't appreciate how hard parents work." My uncle, "She has a good job. She can afford it." My cousin, "Yeah, sounds fair to me." One after another, people I'd grown up with, people who'd hugged me on holidays, eaten at my birthday dinners, cheered for me at graduations, were now acting like my parents handing me a bill for raising me was the most normal thing in the world. I typed out at least 10 different responses, but each one sounded either too defensive or too emotional or too sarcastic. In the end, I deleted everything and just left the chat. Not because they were right, but because I suddenly realized something heartbreaking. None of them had ever seen me as someone with boundaries. They saw me as someone who would always do what was expected, no matter how unfair. That realization changed something. It made me stop feeling hurt and start feeling alert. That afternoon, my mom called me, not to apologize, but to ask, "So when do you plan to start payments?" As if the family group chat had successfully cornered me. I didn't answer her question. Instead, I said, "Why now? Why ask for this now, after all these years?" She hesitated for a moment, then spoke softly. "We need financial help. Your dad is planning an early retirement. Medical bills are coming. We deserve support after all we gave you." Deserve. That word again. But something in her tone caught my attention. She wasn't just being manipulative, she was hiding something. So I asked the question that changed everything. How much debt do you really have? Her silence told me more than her words ever could. Then she finally said, "It doesn't matter. What matters is that families help each other." But it did matter, and I suddenly had a feeling things were much worse than they were letting on. That night, instead of crying or panicking or breaking down, I sat at my kitchen counter and started making a plan, not to pay them, but to understand the real reason behind their sudden demand. And what I found out over the next few days would shift everything. It started when I remembered something strange. My dad once mentioned that he had invested some of their savings with a friend's company, a risky investment, but he said it would double in a year. That was 2 years ago. The next day, I made a few calls. I talked to his old coworkers. I looked up the company, and slowly the truth began to surface. The company had collapsed spectacularly. Fraud, lawsuits, frozen accounts. Investors lost everything, and suddenly everything made sense. My parents hadn't just overspent, they'd gambled away their savings, planning to replace it before anyone noticed. But the money never came back, and instead of accepting responsibility, they decided I should cover the disaster. I wasn't their daughter in this story, I was their bailout plan. For 3 days, I didn't confront them, I didn't argue, I didn't respond to any of their messages demanding an update on the payment plan. I needed to think clearly, not emotionally, because if I confronted them too early, they'd either lie or manipulate the situation until somehow I ended up feeling guilty. On the 4th day, something unexpected happened. I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, an actual letter from a lawyer. The envelope was stamped with my parents' address. Inside was a formal request for repayment. No lawsuit, no threats, just a strongly worded demand letter. I laughed out loud when I read it. They had actually hired a lawyer. They were that serious. They truly believed they could pressure me into paying nearly $50,000 I did not owe. But what they didn't know was that I had information that flipped the entire situation, knowledge they never expected me to have. And once I had the full picture, I realized something sharp and cold. If they wanted to treat our relationship like a business transaction, then I would treat it like one too. The next morning, I drove back to their house. When they opened the door, they looked relieved, maybe thinking I was finally giving in. My mom pulled me into the living room, and my dad was already sitting down with papers in hand, ready to negotiate like I was some customer disputing charges. But this time, I wasn't scared. My voice was calm when I spoke. "I know about the investment you made, the one that went bad." My dad's entire expression froze. My mom's breath caught in her throat. I continued, "So let's talk about fairness. Let's talk about accountability, because if you're going to hand me a bill for my childhood, then I'm going to hand you a bill for your decisions." For the first time since this started, they didn't have anything to say. And that silence, cold, heavy, revealing, was exactly where my plan began. Their silence hung in the room like smoke, thick, heavy, impossible to ignore. It was the first time since this whole mess started that my parents looked genuinely afraid. Not angry, not disappointed, not controlling, just afraid. And the strange thing was, I didn't feel guilty about that. Not even a little. Because it was the first moment where I finally felt like the truth had power again. My mom recovered first. She blinked quickly, straightened her back, and said, "We don't know what you're talking about." My dad nodded, his jaw clenching the way it always did when he was lying. "Don't bring up things that don't concern you." But that was exactly the problem. They expected me to stay in the dark, to stay obedient, to stay the daughter who would always bend instead of break. That version of me died the moment they sent me an invoice for raising me. I said, "It does concern me, because you're trying to force me to pay for mistakes I didn't make." I reached into my bag and pulled out printed documents, company records, investor updates, public bankruptcy filings, everything. I placed them on the table, page by page. My parents watched each sheet land like it was a countdown to something they didn't want to face. My mom whispered, "Where did you get all this?" I said, "Does it matter? This is the truth, and once you know the truth, you can't pretend it's anything else." For a moment, they looked smaller, like two people who had built their whole identities around control, now realizing control wasn't on their side anymore. Then I said the one thing I knew would shift everything. If you want to make this legal, fine, we can make it legal. Because if you take me to court for your fictional invoice, I'll bring all of this with me. And the judge won't just dismiss your claim, they'll ask why you tried to extort your own daughter. My dad's face turned pale, not from anger, but from fear of consequences, real consequences, the kind he wasn't used to facing because he always found someone else to blame. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, and muttered, "We didn't mean it for it to go that far." I shook my head. "You didn't mean for me to fight back." My mom covered her mouth with her hand, eyes watering, not with regret, but with embarrassment. That's when I knew apologizing was never their goal. Their goal was to win. They just didn't expect I'd bring more ammunition. "You should go," my dad finally said. "We need time to think." I stood, picked up my bag, and said quietly, "I'm done giving you time. I'm done giving you explanations. I'm done being manipulated." 3 days passed with no calls, no texts, no emails. At first, I thought maybe they were finally backing off. Maybe the reality had sunk in. Maybe they realized the legal route would embarrass them more than it would hurt me. But deep down, I knew better. Then I received an email that made my blood run cold. It was from my employer's HR department. A polite notification requesting an urgent meeting regarding a personal matter that has been brought to our attention. Attached was a PDF, an exact copy of the invoice my parents had sent me. They had forwarded it to my workplace. And suddenly, this wasn't just family drama anymore. This was war. I stared at the email like it was written in another language. For a few seconds, my brain refused to register what I was seeing. My parents hadn't just crossed a line, they'd launched themselves over it with no plan for the landing. Sending the invoice to my job was calculated. That was intentional. That was them telling me, if you won't play our game, we'll raise the stakes. The HR meeting was scheduled in 1 hour. I changed clothes, grabbed my bag, and rehearsed every possible question they could ask. The more I walked toward the building, the more I felt something strange rising inside me. Something not quite anger, not quite determination. It was something sharper, like the moment before a storm finally breaks. When I reached the HR office, the director, a woman named Melissa, was already waiting. She gave me a sympathetic smile, the kind that meant she'd read everything. "Please sit," she said gently. I sat. She slid a printed copy of the email across the table. We received this from someone claiming to be your parents. We wanted to give you a chance to explain before we make any assumptions." "Thank you," I said. She nodded, as if encouraging me to speak. "It's fake," I said clearly. "It's a family dispute. They're trying to emotionally manipulate me. They sent this because I refused to give them money." Melissa listened closely, her expression unreadable but not hostile. "Are you in any danger?" That question surprised me. "No," I said, "just dealing with toxic family dynamics." She folded her hands on the desk. "I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Please know this isn't a threat to your job. We simply needed to document it and make sure everything is stable on your end." Relief washed through me, but only for a moment. Because then she said softly, "There's one more thing." My muscles stiffened. Melissa sighed and reached for another paper. "Your parents didn't only send us the invoice, they sent a letter too." My heart dropped. "A letter?" She handed it to me carefully. I recognized my mom's handwriting immediately. Dramatic loops, perfectly spaced. The letter was long, emotional, and dripping with manipulative phrasing. It claimed I was mentally unstable, that I was lashing out at my family, that I was breaking down financially, and that they were deeply concerned for my well-being. They positioned themselves as caring, worried parents, totally blindsided by my disturbing behavior. My hands trembled not from fear, but from pure disbelief. "They sent this to my employer?" I whispered. Melissa nodded. "I'm truly sorry. It's intrusive and inappropriate. We will file it as irrelevant personal interference. But I felt you deserved to see it." I folded the letter slowly, my jaw tight. My parents weren't just trying to get money, they were trying to destroy my credibility, my stability, my reputation. They were trying to paint me as unstable so their narrative made sense. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a heated argument. This wasn't a cultural clash. This was character assassination, and it was intentional. After the meeting, I left the office building feeling like the ground had shifted under my feet. That evening, when I got home, I found another email, this time from my cousin. She had forwarded a screenshot of a family group chat I wasn't in. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all discussing me. My dad had written, "She refuses to take responsibility. If she keeps acting like this, she might lose everything. We're trying to save her from herself." My mom followed with, "She is becoming aggressive. We're scared. Please pray for her." And then one by one, the messages poured in. "Kids these days have no respect. She should be grateful. This is what happens when you give them freedom. Maybe she really does need help. Try harder, she's still your daughter." They turned me into a family tragedy, a disaster, a warning. It didn't make me cry. It didn't even make me angry. It made me realize far more important. My parents would never accept the truth because they needed their story more than they needed me. And if I stayed silent, they'd win. They'd rewrite everything. They'd trap me in their version forever. I took a deep breath, held it, and released it slowly. Then I sat down, opened my laptop, and began writing my own narrative, not for them, but for myself. I documented everything: the calls, the invoice, the lawyer letter, the family manipulation, the HR stunt. I saved it all in a folder titled Protection, because I knew there'd come a moment when they pushed one step too far, one step that would force me to respond in a way I could never take back. 3 days later, at 6:14 p.m., it arrived. Another email. This time from a debt collection agency. Subject line, outstanding balance, $49,300. Immediate action required. My parents had officially opened a case. They had turned their fake invoice into a debt claim, and now a third party was involved. This wasn't family business anymore. It was legal fire. And if they wanted a war, they were finally going to get one. I contacted a lawyer the next morning, not because I was afraid, but because I was ready to fight with the same weapons they'd chosen, ready to expose everything they'd done, ready to protect myself legally, publicly, and permanently. My lawyer reviewed everything: the invoice, the demand letter, the HR interference, the debt collection notice. She looked up from the papers with raised eyebrows. This is textbook extortion and harassment. We can not only get this dismissed, we can file a countersuit for emotional distress, defamation, and interference with employment. Do it, I said. She nodded. They'll back down the moment they realize you're serious. But I didn't want them to just back down. I wanted them to understand, truly understand, that they couldn't treat people this way, that manipulation has consequences, that family doesn't mean ownership. I never expected the moment of truth to arrive quietly, but it did. It came on a Wednesday morning, sunlight spilling through my blinds. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the message my mother had just sent. A single sentence. No emojis, no guilt-tripping paragraphs, no dramatic punctuation, just a sentence. Can we talk? For a second, my chest tightened the way it used to when I was a kid being called downstairs after breaking something. But that wasn't me anymore. I wasn't the daughter who apologized just to keep the peace. I wasn't the girl who handed over her bank statements because my parents claimed they just wanted transparency. I wasn't the woman who paid imaginary debts to keep imaginary love. So I texted back, yes. She arrived within 10 minutes. When I opened the door, she didn't walk in with her usual energy, chin up, back stiff, perfume announcing her. She stepped in slow, almost cautious, like she wasn't sure she was welcome. And honestly, I wasn't sure either. She sat on the edge of my sofa and folded her hands, something she never did. Her rings didn't clink like they always did when she moved dramatically. She just sat there breathing, steady, deliberate, as if she was practicing. I read the emails, she finally said. All of them. My stomach dropped. For a second, I forgot how to speak. I thought she was going to explode, accuse me, blame me, twist everything like always. But she didn't. She just sat there, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. You were right, she whispered. It was so quiet I almost didn't hear it. She looked up, eyes glossy, but not crying, just tired.
I don't know how we became people who would charge their own daughter $50,000 for existing. I don't know when it got that bad. I don't know why your father thought it was normal. I don't know why I agreed. My jaw locked because I didn't trust what I was hearing. I had prepared myself for another round of manipulation, but this wasn't the language she usually spoke. She took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. 2 words I had needed for years. 2 words she had probably rehearsed before coming here. 2 words that hit harder than all the fights we ever had. But I didn't fall into her arms. I didn't cry. I didn't try to fix anything. I just nodded, because that was all I had left. Then she opened her bag and pulled out a cashier's check. She placed it on the table like a peace offering. This is the full amount we demanded from you, every dollar, and I added interest because it felt right. The number on the check was almost unreal, more than the invoice, more than what they tried to squeeze out of me, enough to cover the stress, the betrayal, the nights I couldn't sleep, enough to make the universe feel balanced again. It won't fix everything, she said, voice barely above a whisper. I know that, but maybe it can be the first step. I didn't answer. I didn't say thank you. I didn't make her feel better. I let the silence sit heavy between us because it was her turn to feel uncomfortable. After a moment, she stood. You don't owe us anything anymore, and you don't have to forgive me today, or ever. But I hope you will someday. She walked to the door slowly, pausing only once to look back. Not to guilt trip, not to cry, just to look at me. Maybe to memorize me.
Maybe to accept that I wasn't the controllable daughter she thought she owned. When the door closed behind her, the silence was different. It didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like space that finally belonged to me. I picked up the check, turned it over in my hands, and something inside me shifted. For the first time, the money wasn't the point. It wasn't compensation. It wasn't victory. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't crazy, that what they did was wrong, that I had fought back without becoming like them. Proof that I had finally broken the cycle. I didn't cash it right away. I didn't make a scene online. I didn't send a triumphant text to anyone. I just sat with it, breathing in the peace I had earned. Later that night, I walked to the balcony. The city lights were glowing, soft and distant, like 1,000 tiny new beginnings. I leaned against the railing and let the cool air fill my lungs. I thought about all the people who had told me, directly or indirectly, that family betrayal wasn't real betrayal, that parents couldn't be wrong, that children owed their parents blind loyalty, that speaking up was disrespect, that protecting myself made me ungrateful. And I realized how wrong they all were. I didn't rise in some dramatic blaze of fire. I didn't win by destroying anyone. I won by choosing myself. Quietly, consistently, stubbornly. By refusing to fund manipulation with my own hard-earned money. By stepping out of a cycle that had swallowed generations before me. Maybe someday things with my parents will stabilize. Maybe not. But I'm not waiting for that anymore. I'm building a life that doesn't require their approval or their apologies to feel whole. And that is the real freedom. It's the kind of freedom no invoice can ever take away. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in getting revenge. It's in refusing to let toxic people define your worth. It's in standing firm when everyone else tells you to bend. It's in protecting your peace even when it costs you relationships you once thought were unbreakable. I finally learned that family isn't just blood. It's respect, it's boundaries, it's mutual care. And when those things disappear, you're allowed to walk away. I walked away, and I've never felt more free.